Well, thank you all very much for coming to this conversation. It's I think going to be a very important one. I think there's a lot of opportunity out there to bring allies of Israel and the Jewish people together. And there's moments like this where I think there's a lot of curiosity. Why is the support there? How did it get there? That kind of thing. And I think my hope at from this conversation is that we will both learn a lot more about why the support is there and how we can grow it as well, which is really important because we're in this together. This is a civilizational moment. There is this red-green alliance that is against the people who believe that God is at work in this world and that Israel is important in that story and that the Jewish people are important in that story. And so I believe that we need more allies and a lot more of them. So my first question to this esteemed panel is, how did you get in this, how did you come about to be an ally of Israel and the Jewish people? How did it start? I'll start with you then.
Well, for me, there are different strands that led to what started about 12 years ago where Israel advocacy is concerned. Probably first and foremost was being a Christian and also being born in the segregated South in the late 1960s in Little Rock, Arkansas. My family is from there, my mom and my dad. Although I grew up in California, I was raised with a great deal of pride about our heritage. And so just fast forward to the other part, so that knowing about my background, when I heard, and there's always a great deal of Philo-Semitism, both in my family, in the black church traditions I talk about in my book. There's a great deal of spiritual Zionism, the music, the sermons, all these allusions to. So there's always this identification with the God of Israel, that type of thing, in Moses and the children of Israel. But when I later, short version, would hear Israel demonized as a Jim Crow, Zionism is racism. I have South African family as well. So I have South African family who lived through apartheid and Black American family who lived through Jim Crow. So those things for me, because those were real, they were not just fairy tales, that made me angry because I knew that A, Israel was not those things, and B, my family experienced those things. So I have a big mouth like my mom, and I started saying stuff out loud.
No. Yeah, no.
I'm trying to keep it short. I'm a pastor. We talk, so I'm going to be very, very conscious of the fact that this is a panel, so I'm done for now.
Okay, all right. Kaseem, how about you? You got to tell a bit more about yourself.
Okay, I'm not a pastor, but I still talk a lot because I'm Pakistani. So, I have to give the short version of this because otherwise we'll be here a while. So I grew up in England, British, Muslim, Pakistani family. I became very radicalized, not like surfboard radicalized, like jihadist radicalized, and was going to join a terrorist organization called Lashkar-e-Taiba, who are based in Pakistan. That didn't happen, or this would be very awkward for everyone. And essentially what happened when I was at my most radical, most extreme, planning to go back to Pakistan to join Lashkar-e-Taiba, I came across The Case for Israel. I bought the book thinking this is Zionist propaganda, because what you do when you believe something, you put yourself into an echo chamber, and that's what students do. You probably see the videos when people want to discuss. I can't talk to anybody. We're not here to talk. And that's exactly what I was doing. I read The Case for Israel, thought this is Zionist propaganda, but it created a little bit of doubt. And then I started digging deeper. 2 years later, I ended up going to Israel on my own as somebody who was anti-Semitic, somebody anti-Israel, spent 8 hours in security, a lot of fun. If you ever go to Israel and you want to spend, if you can't check into your hotel and you want to be in security for a while, just tell them that you're anti-Semitic and they'll be like, okay, cool, we got you. But no, visiting Israel changed everything, changed my perception. And when I came back from Israel, that first trip, I had a choice to make. Here is a country and a people. I was anti-Semitic. This whole anti-Zionism is complete BS. They're the same thing. You can't say that I'm against Zionism, the movement for the existence of a Jewish state, yet I don't have an issue with Jews. So you only have an issue with Jews as long as they're sovereign in their own homeland and have the rights as everyone else. That's good. That's anti-Semitism. So I came back to England, just started talking about like how, hey, look, it's not that bad. Did not expect it to pan out the way it did, but that made me even more resolute, and then just seeing the way things have panned out, I just kept speaking, and now here I am. So.
Elizabeth, you're
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth. I was raised in a very Christian Zionist home. I was raised in Cleveland, Ohio. There's usually Ohio people in any room I go to. Any? Here? Okay. Yay! I knew it. OH. That's right. So I grew up in Cleveland, and it was you were like Jewish, Italian, Irish. It was a great melting pot. My neighbors were Jewish. My dad's business partners were Jewish. I'm Italian, so I thought I was Jewish. And so it was, but I was raised with my Christian faith being very strong, always knowing that Jesus was Jewish. He was born to a Jewish mother, a Jewish father, and a Jewish family. He lived in Israel. He died a Jewish man. Israel was such a foundation of Christianity in our home. My parents they started a Christian school. My mother was a Christian teacher. So I kind of thought that that's how all of Christianity went. I thought that everybody had the same understanding of how important Israel is to our faith. So I moved to New York City, started working in fashion. I used to work at InStyle magazine for a long time, doing the Golden Globes, Oscars, all the things that are really important to bettering the world. And in fact, my stiletto just got stuck in the stage. And I have this understanding of my Jewish Savior. And I meet another Jewish man. He ends up being my husband, so now I have 2 Jewish men in my life. And married 18 years later with 3 kids. In 2023, I had a very difficult year. My sister, who was the closest thing to me, she passed away, and my husband said to me, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I just want to go to Israel. I want to be close to God." It was my first time in Israel. So I found myself going to Israel September 26th till October 13th for Sukkot. And on October 5th, the Lord's always given me these dreams and visions. It's just how he has always spoken to me. And he gave me a dream on October 5th. It was really vivid. It was of an invasion. And I called my husband and I said, "I don't know what this means. I just know that it means I don't feel safe. I don't know if I should stay." And he said, "Well, you always get those dreams." So I said, "Lord, I'm going to be really specific in my prayer." I was with my dad and my uncle on the trip, and I said, if I'm supposed to go home, make my dad and my uncle change their mind. So that day on the 5th, my uncle got a call from a friend in Istanbul. My dad got very sick. They both changed their mind. They both said, we want to go home. So I changed my ticket. I left the night of the 6th. Supposed to be going on the 7th down to Eilat into Petra, and came home, thank God. Landed to the stories of the butchery and savagery. And a couple weeks later, my husband and I are dealing with anti-Semitism for the first time in our life. We have teenagers, and someone was saying horrible things I can't even repeat here to my middle son. And so I had a choice to make as a mother. I had a choice to make as a human being. I was either going to get in the fight. Everybody needs to be in this fight now. But I was going to do something about it. So Patricia Heaton is a good friend of mine, and she and I were out to dinner. She's amazing. Yes, definitely amazing. Has an incredible platform. And we said, you know what, we have got to call. We lived in Nashville. Both of us were COVIDers. We moved down to Nashville during COVID. And we said, from New York, we said there's 2,500 churches on every corner. There were signs for Black Lives Matter, Ukraine, COVID, the vaccine, the not the vaccine, and all of a sudden, Israel, and there's nothing. No signs, there's nothing. So we challenged all the pastors. We got about 80 pastors and ministry leaders into a room. We had one of my friends who is she was raised radical Islamist. Her father was a PLO fighter. Her grandfather was the head imam of Al-Aqsa. Her grandfather was the head imam of one of the largest mosques in Jordan. She got up and gave her testimony of what it was like to grow up. She was taught to hate Jewish people. My husband gave his testimony, his personal story. His grandfather's grocery store was burned down. We talked to the pastors. We made them sit and watch 20 minutes worth of video of what is happening here in this country because they're not paying attention. And it's not because they're bad people. It's because they are not aware and they're not paying attention because, you know, they're taking care of their sheep and they're taking care of their churches. And that's how we got started. We weren't planning to start 07C. It really just happened. We had a coalition, and then from there, we wrote a letter into the Jewish community apologizing for the historical wrongs of the church into the Jewish community. And we started just reaching out to rabbis. We don't come at it from, we're not pastors. We don't come at it from theological degrees. We call it Patricia calls it, the airhead approach. Carlo has heard us call it this many times, or the duh approach. You just need to reach out and say, how are you? Can I help you? I love you. What can I do? That's it. So we take the Corrie ten Boom watchmaker's daughter approach. Anybody can do anything in their sphere of influence, and that's all it takes. And so that's how we got started, and that's why we're here today. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, yeah, I'm going to drop in a little bit my story too. I don't think I knew any Jews until 2011. I'm originally from Seattle. If I knew Jews, I didn't know they were Jews. I ended up going to Israel the first time in 2012. I went to an anti-Israel conference in Bethlehem and thought if I'm going to spend a week in the Palestinian territories, I should spend a week in Israel proper. And I, just drove up and down the country, meeting people, tell me your story. And I met a lot of really interesting people, really cool people. And then I did the same thing in the Palestinian territories. And I realized it was the two sides, if you will, had very different expectations and desires for the future. I remember sitting with a Palestinian peace activist, a Christian guy, and I said, what do you want? He said, well, I want peace. Well, so is Miss America. That's not an answer. Everybody wants peace, right? So I asked, paint me the picture of peace. What does peace look like? And he couldn't do it with, there weren't any Jews in his picture of peace. And I was like, well, that's not peace. And so I began to, that really kind of, I wrote an article about that experience, I started writing some other articles, started realizing that a lot of the major Christian institutions in the United States, while they were Christian, were also largely anti-Israel, and that was a problem. I started to call them out and started to write and speak, and next thing you know, I'm doing this full time. So that was 10 years ago. So it's, yeah. And so my second question is, there's a, I think there's a lot of perception. This is very strange what you're doing. Do you get pushback? What's been the cost of stepping in and standing in friendship and solidarity with Israel?
So with our organization, Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, our primary focus is the black community, black pastors, leaders. And it was formed in 2013, a few months after my first trip to Israel, which was also 2012. So I say that to give this context. We get almost zero pushback from our community. And people are always shocked when they hear that, because the media, and I tell my Jewish friends, Israel, the media lies on Israel. That's what it does to my community. It's the same media, right? So no, events across the country for years, pastors' relationships, community leaders' relationships, whenever we have conversations, online things or whatever we're doing, 98% of the response is, thank you for this, I didn't know this, I didn't realize this, I forgot about that type of thing. So there's virtually no pushback. Pushback is social media, which is not the real world, right? I mean, Instagram and X, and they're not the real world. So there's either they're bots or they're people who are on there and it's all kind of nasty things about Jews, and then very racist things about black people who stand with Jews when they call Israel racist, all the lack of self-awareness. But in terms of what we do, and in the years that we've been doing it, there's almost zero pushback. And I say almost because there'll be the occasional thing or an event, and someone will be talking about, and they have a narrative, right? Oh, well, Israel's slaughtering Palestinians, and as black people, we should X, Y, Z. But that's the smallest minority of people who actually have that response. So it's overwhelmingly positive, I want to say.
That's good.
So I've got to say one thing. Having been in the room many times when Pastor Dumisani has gotten pushback, it is the greatest thing to watch ever. You see, like, I've literally seen the soul leave these students' bodies, and they're like, oh no, what did I do? What? Like, I remember one of them.
I'm trying to get nicer in my older age.
I remember one event, which I've got to mention, they stood up with this banner, I think it was at Chapel Hill, and they stood up with this banner 3 minutes into your event, and he went, I'm gonna just let you stand there. And they eventually sat down. He just carried on his event. So yeah, I had to draw some attention to that. So I had varieties of pushback in different stages of my life. I'm a Christian now and have been for many years, but when I first started speaking out, I got a lot of death threats. I got disowned by my family. I literally was homeless for a while. I had nowhere to go. I was like kicked out of my home. The death threats eventually got so bad in England that I moved to Canada, because that's every British person's backup plan. It's like, things aren't going well, let's go to Canada. And then I ended up moving to the US because, you know, land of the free and all that. I'm in Florida, so truly the land of the free. And look, now, as a Christian, like Pastor Dumisani said, social media isn't real life. Like, social media, whatever. And here's the thing. I've been in this field for over a decade. I was never super active on Instagram because, like, who has the time? And post 10/7, I started posting more and got a lot of pushback. Now, here's the thing. I am a Christian. I am a follower of Jesus. A lot of work to be done still. And I always like to say I'm from the south side of the kingdom. So, like, I can throw my hands up in prayer, but I also throw hands. Like, I'm kind of a bit of both. And when you're raised by Pakistani immigrant parents, or anyone who's raised by immigrant parents knows there is no one can say anything to you which is worse than what your parents said to you when you were growing up, out of love. So nothing offends me. So people started coming at me, and I just started roasting them. And I will never forget this. It was October 10th. And I'd like just been roasting these haters on social media. And I don't know who this person is to this day. And I get a voice memo. It's like, hey, look, you don't know me. We're in Israel. We're in a bomb shelter right now, and it's really difficult. But the way you're roasting people is really amusing to us, so please don't stop. And I was like, Lord, am I using my powers of evil for good? But no, working at CUFI, we get pushback. We had our conference not that long ago. We had protesters come in. We had people on the river opposite the hotel holding signs saying CUFI kills. We were like, no, CUFI slays, get it right. So look, you're always going to get it. But ultimately, what they're trying to do is fear and intimidation. They want you to be silent. They want you to be quiet. So how do you respond to that? You get even louder. You get even more bold. And to anybody Jewish in the audience, I'll always say this, never hide who you are. Don't shrink who you are because of someone else's hate. What you represent is a historical miracle. And without the Jewish people, there would be no Christianity. So we're grateful to you. So don't hide or shrink away from that.
My family's not very happy that I'm in this space so boldly, and even my Jewish family is not happy. They have, I think they wish that they're just worried for my safety, for the safety of the kids, those sort of things. But yes, we get the threats online. We've had horrible things said. I hope you go to hell. You're a religious extremist. Probably had all the same things said to us. And the biggest thing I think is probably right now, because it's such a call for Patricia and I, and we're getting called into so many spaces and so many communities, which is amazing, and we feel so honored. But my daughter said to me recently, so I have teenagers and then I have a 7-year-old, and she was like, Mom, you haven't been around in like weeks, and I miss you. And this season had been set aside for me. I've worked and to set aside to really spend more time with my kids. And we had a very frank mom and daughter conversation. She said, Mom, I don't want you to quit. I know you're fighting for Israel, and you need to fight for Israel. But she was like, I just miss you. So when I travel, that's been hard. And one of the things she did say to me the other day was, she said she went to school and she asked her entire class to pray for Israel. And there was a girl in class that said, why are we praying for Israel? Israel's bad. She said, she stood up and she said, Casey, you are wrong. Israel is good, and we are going to pray for Israel. And she said the entire class prayed for Israel. I got a call from the teacher. She said the whole class prayed. Yeah, so everything is worth it, and our children are the future, and we have to show them that they can't be afraid. And I think we probably haven't seen the worst of what we're going to deal with standing in this space, but Jesus said, count the cost and pick up your cross, and Patricia and I had a very frank conversation early on. Let's count the cost, and we have a lot to lose, but we have so much to gain, and we all have to count the cost and be in this space.
No, it is very. It can be a challenging space. It's obviously social media stuff, is a challenge.
He said, I just put Casey on blast.
Exactly. But it's also like there's a perception from a lot of Christians that, like, why are you doing this? It's very weird. It's strange. Like, that's often the direction it goes, at least in my world. And again, it just comes down to what am I going to stand for? And what am I, like, is it worth it? The answer I've already decided is yes. And once that decision is made, then it's just a matter of walking it out, right? And because, I used to pick on people that would quote Genesis 12:3, like mock them almost. Like, I can't believe, which says, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. But I tell you what, from the moment I started doing this work, yes, I've felt the cost. Yes, I've felt the attacks and whatever, but I've also not been more blessed than I am right now. Yeah. And I see it over and over and over again.
That's a beautiful thing.
I just want to be very, very clear on that one question, Luke, and go back. I said it in the context of the black community. Not that it's a silo, but just in terms of most of what I do. But I have to add this. The pushback we do get is virtually never in the black community. It's other people who are telling me and our organization what we should be doing. This is usually the case. That part, I have to make sure I make that very, very clear. We get pushback, but not from the black community, right? So I just wanted to make sure I said that.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So my next question is, there has what have been some awkward moments in this work you've done? Some things that didn't expect you, perhaps. Because there is a bit of cross-cultural. I mean, we're Christians and we're working with Jews, who many of whom are not, some are believe in Torah and the Hebrew Bible, and some do not. So there's a lot of what I would call cross-cultural issues that arise. What's been some interesting things that you've experienced over the years?
Trying to do this quickly. So probably there's a few, but I'll just pick something. Culturally, this is connected to the pushback thing. If we encounter especially younger Jewish kids who've been duped into being anti-Israel, that becomes something that we often navigate. Sometimes they're not younger, they're older, right? That for us, and we get it, there's times, sometimes when our Jewish friends see that, if they see it happening publicly or whatever, and they'll come, they say, oh, Pastor Dumisani, we're so sorry. I said, dude, we have those in my community too, so I get it. You ain't gotta apologize. There are black folks who don't know their story and start putting somebody on blast because they don't know their own story, right? So that for me is probably the chief of those, right? Just navigating those, and I also say we don't really deal with that public. That's behind closed doors. There's certain things that there's certain things I would never say publicly because it doesn't. I'm not giving Al Jazeera any quotes, none of that stuff, right? I'm not gonna say, but I have those conversations privately, right? We have those, but those are the ones that are difficult. And the last thing I'll say is that they're often, sometimes in the older Jewish community, those Zionists, those people who know, they'll come and they'll share. This happened over years. Pastor Dumisani, our hearts are broken. They'll talk about their child or their grandchild who's at X university, who's now a rabid anti-Zionist, right? And they'll just talk about their heart, and that's always grips our hearts, right? We get it, right? They say, Pastor Dumisani, my child, my granddaughter, my grandson, I'm just so heartbroken. And we just pray for them, right? Because you can't fix it at that moment. You just say, and they'll say, thank you for the work that you're doing. I'm heartbroken that my child, my grandchild is in that thing. So that's always difficult to hear, and lets us know we're all in the same fight as parents and grandparents as well. So, yes.
Similarly, we have, like the protesters we had, a lot of them were young Jews, Jews for justice for Palestine or whatever. So that is an interesting situation to be dealing with. I think on the flip side of it, one of the accusations, I'm sure we've all dealt with this, is you're only supporting Israel because you want Jesus to come back and you want the end. I'm like, bro, I haven't paid off my car. I ain't looking for the end of time right now. Like, I got a lot of payments still. Like, let's hold up. And look, the people always assume there's some sort of nefarious intentions behind Christian support for Israel. And I get it. There's a bad history there, and we acknowledge it. Every Christian who knows history knows that, unfortunately. So CUFI's founder, Pastor Hagee, once said it in a meeting. He was like, look, when Christians see the cross, we see salvation. For the Jewish people, the cross has almost represented the electric chair. It's meant persecution and torture and murder. And we were well aware of that. So there is always that. I think the other thing is when I meet people who all of a sudden, who aren't religious, who aren't Christian, who aren't Jewish, are experts in Christian eschatology, like Christian end of days doctrine. I'm like, I'm in theology school and I've never heard of this. So there are those challenges. And I was talking to Sandy, who spoke yesterday at the plenary, who is from CUFI, and I was like, Sandy, when I joined CUFI, I was not Christian, I was Muslim. Y'all didn't even try and convert me. Like, I'm a little bit offended. Like, come on. So that is one of them. But on the flip side as well, and I always say this to our students and our high school students, because some have never met anyone Jewish. Like, they may have gone to a Christian school, so meeting a Jewish person, like, their reference is almost biblical. I'm like, guys, just don't be weird. That's it, like, just don't be weird. You don't have to be weird. Like, you don't have to, buy a shofar for them. Like, just be cool. Like, just be chill. So, like, there's multiple levels of, things that happen. But, look, CUFI is 20 years old soon. But it's still very new for the Christian community, this support for Israel and what this looks like. And as I'm sure all of you guys can say, Christianity is changing and how young Christians engage with their faith. So there's always going to be challenges, but you got to laugh at it sometimes, because what else are you going to do? Yeah.
I probably, because I'm in a different situation, because I'm a Christian, married into a Jewish family. I've been in a Jewish family for 20 years, so we have Shabbat every Friday. I make challah. So I haven't had, and Patricia's been in Hollywood for 30 years, so we know a lot about Judaism and the Jewish culture. Which is great because we can act as bridges. But I wasn't as fully aware until I moved down to Nashville. I lived in New York City for a while. I lived in Chicago. So there's larger Jewish populations. When I moved down to Nashville, I was invited over to Christmas dinner at a friend's house with my husband and my kids. And I was on this group text, meeting the new moms in school, and everybody's figuring out what you're going to make for Christmas, like a casserole and this and that. And somebody's making the honey baked ham, and someone puts on the thread with 20 moms, oh, the Dorros family can't eat the ham. And I was like, oh no, I agree with you, it's disgusting, but we do eat it. And so it just made me realize, wow, we have so much work to be done, on just such a basic level of understanding. And so, which is exciting too, because it doesn't take a lot to cross over. It doesn't take a lot to say, hey, come over to my house for Shabbat, or to come, or let's go out for dinner. So that was that was eye-opening for me when I moved down to Nashville and realized, okay, we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, no, I think there is. I don't know if you guys have seen this increase, and there is more collaboration, and it is increased even more so after October 7th, but even before. And so I think there's so much anytime you're bringing two distinct communities together, especially ones that have such a long history of division, you're going to encounter some very awkward moments, right? I remember I was sitting with a rabbi in Georgia, and he was complaining about the local school board because they had passed a resolution on anti-Semitism, but he didn't like it. And so he was going off on those white Christian men, the white Christian men. I was like, dude, I'm a white Christian man, right? It's like, let me talk to those white Christian men and we'll work something out, right? Like, it's my crew, but I think there's a lot of new stuff happening. There's a bunch of since October 7th, there's a ton of new organizations that have been formed and are forming, and WhatsApp groups, and I think we're probably we're probably often perhaps the only non-Jews in those rooms or those circles, and so we are trying to represent. There's a couple billion of us, and trying to hold back some of the stuff, the expectations on both sides. So it is important that we address those and walk that line together. Yeah, it's important. One of the things you brought this up already, I think, Kaseem, is that there's often an expectation that there's an ulterior motive to this work. How do you answer that? How do you what do you say when you get that accusation? Why are you really doing this? That kind of thing. Because I think that's often in the back of people's minds, that because there has been over the years.
There's trauma there.
Yes. Doesn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah. So I always say, look, judges, actions speak louder than words. Like, as an organization, we've existed for over 20 years. I said this in passing. So Rabbi Aryeh Sheinberg, of blessed memory, he's an Orthodox rabbi in San Antonio who passed away. Without him, there would be no CUFI. He was the rabbi who was like, maybe this pastor is our friend. Maybe he is. And so his son is still very involved with CUFI. And I was like, Rabbi, you got your whole crew here. We had like 50, 60 Orthodox Jewish men. He was like, yeah, we roll deep for CUFI. Like, but like that, for me, look, here is an Orthodox rabbi who comes to every CUFI summit. They come to all our... If they thought something was off, they would have bounced a long time ago. But I say to people, look, judge us by our actions. And I respect that you have this trauma that you're dealing with. I'm never going to condemn you for being hesitant, because there's a bad history there. And for everyone in this room, then you have the Candace Owens who claimed that, Christ is king, but she's a terrible human being and an anti-Semite. So it's a real struggle. But no, I say, look, we recognize the history. We're non-conversionary, and that has been CUFI's policy since day one. Judge us by our actions. And like Sandy said from the stage, you're stuck with us, whether you like it or not. And look, ultimately, and I blame social media for this. Social media has created a world where it's everything or nothing. If you have an ally, you have to agree on everything. No, we don't. We are a one-issue organization, Israel, and that's it. We can disagree on everything else. And as people used to ask Pastor Hagee and Rabbi Sheinberg all the time, how do you two reconcile? You believe Jesus is the Messiah, Rabbi Sheinberg doesn't, and they would answer with this. I think this is the best answer. When Messiah comes, we'll ask, first time or second time, and the one will make a change. It's simple as that. Until then, let's work together. And
Actually, Patricia and I were being interviewed the other day, and one of the journalists asked us about our eschatological views. And it's funny, we keep getting that question. A lot of it I honestly never heard of it. And that's what I said to the journalist. I said, look, you get a room full of Christians, unless they're at a conference for the end times and they all go to the same church. You are going to get Christians with completely different views different eschatological views. Some of the things I'm hearing for the first time, in the Jewish community. So there's zero motive except to obey. I'm speaking from my heart, and I know everybody here, to obey my scriptures and to obey. And the Bible is so clear for Christians to stand with the Jewish people, to stand with Israel. I wanted to read, similar to what you were just talking about, there's a verse, judge our actions. James 2 says, so also faith, if it does not have works, it's dead. One of my favorite verses that we say often is Romans 15. It says, therefore I will praise you among the Gentiles. I will sing the praises of your name. Again, it says, this is a commandment to Christians, rejoice you Gentiles with his people. Those are just two verses in the scriptures. I mean, the Bible is so full of instruction to stand with the Jewish people. There's also, I won't read it now, but Francis Schaeffer is one of the founders of Christianity, founders of the Reform movement, and he wrote in a bulletin in 1943 on anti-Semitism, Francis Schaeffer, and he was so clear to his congregation and to the Christians at the time why they needed to stand with the Jewish people, why it was important to stand with Israel, and why it was their duty as Christians to stand against anti-Semitism. So I think a lot of this has been diluted because Christians aren't reading their scriptures. And if Christians were reading their scriptures, everything would be different. So there's no motive, it's just for me, and again, for everyone here, I know it's just obedience to God. I know and believe that I will stand before God one day, and I want him to say, well done, good and faithful servant.
I just echo everything Kaseem and Elizabeth have said. I just remember my dear friend Victor Stursky, we served for years together at CUFI. He'd often say to his Jewish friends, and I always laugh when he said it, we have a hard enough time getting Christians to be Christians. We're not trying to, we have our work cut out. Now, I will acknowledge, are there some Christians and casinos that have that wackadoo thing and they're trying to gather all the, yeah, it's a small percentage, but yeah, for some who don't truly love Israel and Jewish people, but they're trying to check a box, yeah, that exists in any community, but I can tell for us, it's not a motivation for us, or the vast majority of Christians that I know, they recognize, as Elizabeth said, the word of God says, I'll bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you, not I'll bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you, if you convert to Christianity. There's no caveats that are pray for the peace of Jerusalem if the Jews become Christians. There's none of those things are there, so we recognize if you just read the Bible, you'll be okay.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, there's often this perception, again, the end times thing, I hear that often. And the perception is, Christians believe the Jews have got to go back to the land, and then the nations will come against them. I'm like, that's not actually in the New Testament. It's actually in the book of Zechariah, which is in your part of the book. All right, so it shows me, go read your part, and then we'll come talk about eschatology, right? But let me just ask, what's ahead over the next, couple months? We have the 1-year anniversary coming up in a couple weeks. What is your organizations doing? How are you leaning into this moment? How are you leaning into bringing more and more allies on board with the moment we're in?
Okay, two quick things. Number one, there's two phases or aspects to what we do, both in the Black American community as well as both African nationals and then on the continent. So for us, what is very important is that there is a, first and foremost, Black American Christian voice that is added to this large piece of the puzzle when it comes to standing with Israel, when it comes to articulating this, when it comes back to pushing back on the whole false social justice narrative, all of those things. And so we've launched just another effort where we will be in a different city every month next year, doing what we call the Forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. We engage a small group of between 20 to 30 pastors in that area, small and intimate on purpose, so that we can delve into these very, very difficult issues. We started our first one here 2 weeks ago here in DC, and we'll be in different cities doing that. Second part is that we're also very much engaged with African pastors as well. We're planning our first Black American and African pastors tour to Israel later on this fall. And among the many reasons why we're doing that, before, and this goes back to the first question about the why, long before I was in Israel advocacy, as a pastor, I was as ordained back in the mid 1990s. And what has always been a part of our ministry is the realization and acknowledgement of the persecuted church in the Middle East and Africa. So long before I was doing Israel, I was doing Christians in Sudan, Nigeria, Syria, so on and so forth. Voices of the Martyrs, some of you are aware of those organizations in the United States that have been doing amazing work for decades. The reason I mention that is because that dovetailed into the Israel part later on when, for example, Israel, some of you may be aware of this, around 2006, quick example, is when there was a flood of Sudanese refugees who were fleeing Omar Bashir, who was then the dictator of Sudan, as well as Eritrea, Afwerki, who's the president there. There were things that were happening there, and tens of thousands of Eritrean, Sudanese, and Congolese refugees wound up in Israel over the between 2006 and 2013 or so. To this day, there's still like a 50,000 number in Tel Aviv in terms of the Sudanese refugees. So I was aware of why they fled. So the connection was when I saw the media demonizing, because there was difficulties there. Some of you, if you're from Tel Aviv, you don't need anyone to tell you. It was difficult. There was who were jobs, and there was other problems. It's the problem of any type of situation where if it's immigration and there's war torn, it's just difficult, right? So some of the nastiest things that could be reported on were in the news. And the thing that got me really, I have to stay Christian, angry, I was gonna say something else. What got me really angry was that not only was Israel being demonized in these very select situations, what was being ignored was why they were fleeing Sudan by the tens of thousands. They didn't care anything about that. These people were being slaughtered, displaced into the millions, slaughtered into the millions, and it's still happening right now, right? But B, Israel generally welcoming them, giving them scholarships at Israel universities. Some of them were setting up businesses, owning daycare centers, and the media was completely uninterested in the last part when I saw Christians jump on the bandwagon to beat up on Israel. I said, where the hell were you when those Christians were fleeing Sudan, when they were fleeing Nigeria, right? So after October 7th, some key voices within that African Christian population, chief among those would be Simon Deng, who's a former Sudanese slave. Some of you may know him. He wrote an op-ed in the tablet. If you haven't read it, please read it. I believe the title is, First They Came for My People, Then They Came for the Jews. And he said that when he saw the images of October 7th, the trauma for him was that he lived it. He went through the exact same thing, everything from the jihadist mindset to the slaughtering to the kicking slaves, because there are Israeli hostages in Hamas, in Gaza, who can't eat, who are being forced to work there, being forced into slavery. He saw that and said, I experienced that. I was taken as a slave from southern Sudan to North Sudan, where he was a slave for several years. He began to write, he began to speak, and my dear friend Charles Jacobs formed an organization called the African Jewish Alliance, where African nationals, both here in the States, obviously in Africa, as well as Israeli Jews, and now we're bringing Black Christians together to bring voice here because, and it's my first long answer that I promise to be my only one. When we see our Jewish brothers and sisters on the streets of the United States of America and in our colleges and universities being spit on, being accosted, being screamed at, being attacked, any Christian who knows his history knows that first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. We tell them that not only do you have a biblical obligation to stand with our Israel and the Jewish people, but if you have a brain in your head, they are not going to stop with the Jews. They're coming after the Jewish people now. In a moment, it's going to flip. This is why after the Jews were expelled from North Africa and the Middle East, that's why they're slaughtering Christians. If there were large numbers of Jews there, they'd be killing them. But they expelled the Jews, so that's why they're slaughtering the Christians. We tell them what's going on in Sudan and Nigeria. People say, oh, that will never happen here. You don't understand history. They said it too. I have Igbo friends who said it would never happen. Boom, it's happening. So that's the other thing. We're telling these Black pastors, this is our initiative, particularly going forward with our organization.
So I think anybody involved in the space would say that it's almost two realities. There was the pre-October 7th world and the post-October 7th world. Directly after, so first thing, Christians United for Israel We have 10 million members across the United States. It's a very large organization, and we do multifaceted things. So directly after October 7th, on October 7th, Christians United for Israel sent $2 million in aid to Israeli first responder organizations. Since then and today, we have sent $11 million directly to Israel to support organizations working with displaced people, for all these things. Right after October 7th, we created, because we thought this message was important and still important, Israel, you are not alone. And we had, I can't remember the last number I got, I think, but it's over 7,000 people donated to get an Israel You Are Not Alone lawn sign. So they are all over the United States. We held hundreds of events. I think the current count is, since October 7th, I think it's 289 events, not including our campus and next generation events. That's just churches all over the US. And this was probably, for me, the most significant thing we did. What we do is very multifaceted. So a few months ago, there was a holdup in aid being released to Israel. In 2 days, we brought together 50 CUFI leaders from every single state, from Hawaii to Alaska, and we lobbied hard for 2 days. 2 days later, that bill was passed. So what CUFI does is multifaceted, and what we're going to be doing going forward. We have now a high school division. We have a high school curriculum, and multiple Christian schools have adopted our Israel curriculum because the battle for the next generation starts now. It started years ago. It doesn't start next week. It has to start now. Our campus program is in the process of rebuilding and retooling for what's happening. We have a number of events planned for October 7th. We are still running trips to Israel for pastors. We have trips for high school administrators where we take them to Poland and to Israel. I was part of a trip that we took former Special Forces veterans to understand why they need to stand with Israel as veterans and why it's so important for Americans to stand with Israel. Our educational resources, we're continuing to grow because, look, for me, I was a Zionist before I was a Christian. And of course, the two things are intertwined. But I think it's so important for any Christian to be able to make the secular argument for Israel. Because if I go because of God, somebody's like, I don't believe in God. Well, all right, well, cool. Like, I don't know where do we go from here. So we are, because for me, look, being an ally, I don't like that term because it almost feels transactional. Being a friend has to be much deeper than you're not alone. Being a friend, I need to understand what is making you hurt and how we can stop that. I need to make sure that me and every single one of our members understand why the Fatah brigades in Syria are a direct threat to Israel and America's security, why Ansar Allah are a direct threat, and why we need to be speaking out, why what's happening on our campuses impacts us, and why we need to be standing up. So it's multifaceted. We need to be standing there as allies, but it also needs to be actual tangible action. When bills need to be passed, we act. We have congressional representative program. We have, we're still working on it, but we almost have a representative in every congressional district. So they are establishing a one-on-one relationship with their congressman. So when something happens about Israel, they're like, let me call Pastor Dave in Idaho, who's a real person. Let me call him because he's always talking about Israel. So they have a point of reference. So it's multifaceted, congressional, educational, campus, high school, and very soon we have a project to work with kindergarten kids. So they are also being exposed to because we're realizing that college is too late. College is too late. And there are too many people in between high school and college who are, look, you're seeing it in places like Canada, and even here, that kids are being brainwashed. So we need to be there and get the truth to them at every stage, and we have to speak to them in their language. And look, people have said that CUFI's message doesn't resonate with everyone. That's fine. We have 10 million members. We continue to grow. People are resonating with our message from high school. Like in 2 weeks, I'll be traveling to San Antonio because we have our high school conference. And I love our high school students because they are, it's like, to me, it's even, as somebody who's worked in this field for a decade, to see these high school students who are dealing with so much, who are like trying to figure out where they go to college, but they're taking 3 days out of their time to come and stand with Israel, and they want to be better advocates. I get so many emails from them like, what is the best Israeli news source? What do you think about this? And it's like, that is what gives me hope for the future. So look, I'm like, do I be controversial? I am, why not? Look, sometimes I see Jewish influencers go, we truly are alone. No, you're not. You're simply not. Like, it's not true. Like every one of us has our circle of friends who stand with Israel, who continue to stand with Israel. And I think that people who are echoing that message of the Jewish people are alone, it's either those from outside who want you to feel alone, or those who are doing it for their own benefit because they want to play the hero. This isn't a fight we're all in together. Because, like Pastor Dumisani said, first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. But even more important than everything else, for me, as a Christian, as a human being, as a very cool human being, the Jewish story is the single greatest story in human history. Nothing compares to it. The Jewish people, every single Jewish person here, you are a miracle. You are the answer to Hitler, to Haman, to Pharaoh. Every single person who tried to wipe you out, you are the response that Am Israel Chai, we are here and we're not going anywhere, and we are here to lock arms with you side by side.
I'm just going to repeat what he said. All right, so we're the new kids on the block, I will say quickly, with Patricia's platform and her name, I mean, she played America's mother for so long, so it's really a beautiful thing. Like, it's so incredible. She does not have to be doing this right now, and she is feeling like she is called to this space. So it's so beautiful to go into these communities and have both Jewish and Christian families say, like, you were in my family room for all this time. And we're going into a lot of communities, and we're able, because there's a lot of churches that are standing, like you were saying, the Jewish people are not alone. There are so many Zionist churches, pastors. There's a lot, though, that need to rise up and stand up. So they may not come to hear a message, but they'll come to hear Patricia speak. And so we're finding ourselves going into a lot of these churches and communities that, you know, one in particular, right after October 7th, came out and said, peace to the Middle East. That was what they were putting on their social media. Now he just signed a declaration saying he's standing with the Jewish people. We went in, we did a community event. Praise God, all of our events are selling out because mostly they want to see Patricia. They leave loving Israel. And you know, we had 600 people at a church recently. So it's just been unbelievable to see the unity. I had one rabbi come up to me at an event, and he said, I looked back on the evening and I thought about in Genesis when Jacob said, I didn't realize God was in the room, and now I look back and said, God is in the room tonight. We had one event where a rabbi, he's one of the top 10 rabbis in the world, never stepped foot in a church, but he stepped foot in a church because he wanted to stand with Patricia. And it was so powerful. It was the first time that he was ever in a church. And so we're on the front lines just to be able to see this unity in a lot of these churches that will turn over and be a part of this group of Zionist pastors and Zionist churches. So we're continuing to do that. Patricia is also launching on Monday on Fox and Friends a campaign. She had this idea very early on. Was one of I believe it was a college student that their mezuzah was ripped off of their door. So she's starting a campaign on Monday, My Zuzah, Your Zuzah, hashtag. And so she's gonna be posting a video and calling for Christians, Jewish, everybody to be posting videos, putting a mezuzah up on your door to show solidarity with the Jewish people. Montana Tucker told me she's gonna put one up, so there we go. It's gonna go viral. And we're also doing a trip to Israel. Again, our heart is for the average person who feels like, I don't know the geopolitical landscape. I want to get involved, but I don't understand the conflict. And we're taking a trip to Israel in May. So it's for all women, Jewish and Christian. We have a woman pastor and an Orthodox teacher. It'll be May 18th, the week in Israel, and it's just going to be we're calling it the Deborah Rising. So for all Deborahs to come, to stand with Israel, to stand with the Jewish people. And so we've got that launching. And we're growing. So you'll be hearing more of O7C very soon, but we're thankful to be here.
Awesome. So I also got to invite you all on October 7th. About 4 months ago, I pulled a permit for the mall on Washington, D.C. for October 7th because I wanted to do it before Hamas did, so I figured I should get it first, and I did. So we got tons and tons and tons of Christian organizations, a lot of Jewish organizations getting on board. What we will do is I'm currently printing all of the pictures of all the people who died on October 7th on poster-size placards, and we're going to hold them up, and then we're going to march from our event spot to in front of the White House with those faces, and there'll be thousands and thousands of Christians and Jews and Muslims and Hindus and all kinds of people of various colors, and we're all going to show that we do actually stand in friendship and solidarity. You've heard so many. This is just a taste. I tell you, this is a taste of what is happening all over the country that most of the time you never hear about. People aren't doing good things in friendship and solidarity, and they're not doing it for a social media high or a post. They're doing it because they care. And so remember that, be encouraged by that, be uplifted in your spirit with that, because that's what's happening all over the place. So thank you very much for allowing us to be here.
Thank you. I have no words. I just want to add one more thing. So of course, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing. When I met Luke before and to discuss about the panel, I just told him, it's not as IAC, just as Israeli, just as Jewish person, just unbelievable to understand where is it coming from, and I think we got it today. we got the picture, where is it coming from. I just wanted to tell you all that there is a book of Pastor Washington. It's available outside about Zionism and the Black Church. It's available outside at the Shuk. You are welcome to go and look at it and purchase it. Thank you again. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it very much. Those of you who ordered lunch, it's in level -2. You're welcome to proceed. It's starting now, the lunch.
Last night. We met last night. I wanted to get your number because I wanted to follow up.